Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootleggers, shills, desolate source, peasants, vassals, Kurds. I'm a useful idiot, and today I'd like to talk about Kurdistan. And the reason why Kurdistan is important is because now there's more discussions going on about the possibility of a Kurdish state carved out of Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, or some combination thereof. And the reason why is because, once again, we have a post-colonial world in which these borders were artificially created, and that leaves the traditional Kurdish lands overlapping in four nations in the Middle East. And of course, all four of those countries have had varying degrees of problems with their Kurdish population. So in Iraq, of course, we know about the northern region of Iraq. It's a Kurdish semi-autonomous state, and they've actually had autonomy since 1970. They were granted a great deal of autonomy, and that was renewed in 2005. And they even have their own parliament, so they essentially operate as a separate entity, and have recently been wooing foreign contracts for developing their oil industry in northern Iraq. And incidentally, they have the sixth largest oil reserves in the world, so there's a lot at stake in the northern region of Iraq known as Kurdistan. And then, of course, Turkey has had an ongoing struggle with their Kurdish population for generations and generations, because once again, we find this current epoch we're in, and all the violence has its roots going back through history, and in this case, the Ottoman Empire. So at the end of World War I, the Ottoman Empire crumbled, and we were left to have the colonial powers redesign all of the borders and create all these new countries out of the Middle East. And that has led to a lot of the problems that we have now, and certainly a lot of the internal problems that these countries have with their Kurdish populations. And there's almost been a Kurdish state quite a few times. Prior to World War I, most Kurds lived in a province of the Ottoman Empire called Kurdistan. So the state was the blueprint for the state has already existed. And then of course, after World War I, the collapse of all the monarchies and empires throughout Europe, and including the Ottoman Empire, the Allies wanted to create several countries out of the region left from the crumbling Ottoman Empire in that region. And that's where Syria and Iraq came from. And at the time, there were plans to create a independent Armenia and Kurdistan, but the Turks managed to recapture some of the territory, and dreams of a free Kurdistan at that time were dashed. And Kurds didn't take too well to that. They saw this opportunity, and they rebelled. In fact, they had a rebellion in 1920. They had a rebellion in 1924. They had another rebellion in 1927, and another one in 1937. And of course, the insurgency has been continuing through the 1970s and 80s and 90s in Turkey as well. And so this is another conflict and another scenario in the Middle East where its roots go back to the Ottoman Empire and the post-colonial world. And so what is the likelihood of a independent Kurdish state? A lot of pundits talk about it, and certainly there's a lot working against it. Kurdistan in northern Iraq has been granted a certain amount of autonomy, and that has worked well for them now, but it seems unlikely that Iraq would ever let an independent state be created in northern Kurdistan, although geopolitical events can unfold, and I think that is a likely scenario at some point, that a independent Kurdish state will be created in northern Iraq. And but the situation in Turkey is a lot more complex, and they, of course, are a NATO ally. They've been dealing with the Kurds for 100 years or more, and they certainly are not going to allow the southern portion of their country to be carved off and made part of a greater Kurdistan. And Iran and Syria also have chunks of lands inhabited mostly by Kurds, and Syria, of course, is why this discussion has come up again. If Syria, the Assad regime is toppled, there may be a land grab for an independent chunk of Kurds and a part of a future Kurdistan. And this is where I think it gets interesting, because no one can predict what geopolitical events will unfold, or certainly at least how they will unfold. And I could see a Kurdistan being created in an incremental way, and that way it wouldn't be so dramatic as a huge population in that area of 35 million who just unilaterally declare a Kurdish state. I could see it built in incremental steps. Suppose a independent Kurdistan was claimed in northern Syria, and it was accepted. It wouldn't take too long for the Kurds in northern Iraq to basically make moves towards joining that state, should it be created. And this could also happen with several other states in that area. And I find this really interesting, these parallels with the Kurds and Israelis, because, of course, the Jewish population was the largest group in the world without their own country for quite some time in European history and world history. And now the Kurds are the largest peoples without their own country. I also find it interesting that after World War II, of course, Israel and the Zionists and the Jews were granted their traditional homeland in Palestine, and they all went there, and then this country was recognized. But a Kurdish delegation went to the UN after World War II in 1945 and proposed a homeland for their persecuted population, and they were denied. So an interesting double standard there. And let's remember that the Kurds have been persecuted their entire lives as well, and certainly under the Turks. Thousands and thousands of villages have been destroyed, and I think something like 37,000 people have died in the struggles with the Kurdish insurgencies in these regions. So they've paid a price, and let's remember as well that Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons against the Kurdish population in the north, and the U.S. did nothing about it at the time. But they certainly qualify as a persecuted people, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in their future. Should there be an opportunity to create a independent Kurdish state? I certainly think, as far as the United States is concerned, and even Israel, they would very much welcome and are probably orchestrating moves towards a Kurdish state, because it would certainly serve our interests. Kurdistan would be a very loyal ally, and of course they have the 6th largest oil reserves in the world, as well as being very rich in minerals. So they have much to offer us. And so there you have it. Kurdistan. Will the Kurds ever get their way? I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.